This week, I want us to examine the prayers of Bible characters, which will show us their heart and the faithfulness of the God whom they served. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Monday. You know, there are many prayers that are recorded in the Bible, I believe, for our benefit. I realize that person was not praying their prayer for us to hear, but we learn how they trusted in the God of their fathers and how their prayers were answered whenever they called upon him. One such prayer came from Elijah as he faced off against all the false prophets in the land and against Ahab, their wicked king, on top of Mount Carmel. The scene is set where the prophets of Baal, and by the way, their false god had been raised to power and authority even in the land of God's people by wicked leaders like Ahab and Jezebel. They had built an altar and prayed for their God to bring down fire from heaven. Of course, nothing happened as Elijah made fun of them and called out that their God must be sleeping. Maybe they need to yell louder. Then Elijah rebuilt the altar. He placed a sacrifice upon it and even had them pour barrels of water over the altar to make the fire from God even more outstanding, to know this wasn't just a spark or a brush fire. I also believe that asking for barrels of water during a drought was his sacrifice to God, who was hearing and answering his prayers to bring fire down from heaven. And just before Elijah calls for God to bring the fire, he prays this very simple prayer in 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse 36. Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and I'm just your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that you are the Lord God, and that you have turned their hearts back to you again. He not only calls upon his God, but he points out that he has historically been the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all their forefathers. And his main goal here is that it be known that you are the God of Israel. Wouldn't it be great if that was our goal and our main prayer, that God would always be magnified in everything that we do? His main request, it seems like, was not for fire to fall from heaven, but because he knew that God was going to do that anyway. He just wanted Israel to know that Yahweh was the Lord God, the true and living God. And his final request is this: the Lord would turn Israel's hearts back to God. You see, these people hadn't been duped into believing that a false god like Baal was important or all-knowing. It was all done by their leaders. Does that sound familiar? Our government has tried for years to turn us away from following after God. For Elijah, this was not a show of power, but a call to turn people back to follow God. Wow. Let's make that our prayer today, that God would be so glorified through some great things in our lives and things that he does around us, that it would draw people to himself. And we, of course, would just be his servants in all of these things.